What's up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here. The format of this podcast is I read your questions, and then we talk about them like two people sitting in the cab of a truck rolling down the highway. You say, hey, Granger, I got a question for you. And I work it out like I would with a friend, not because I'm right, but, as hopefully an encouragement. That's what we're here for. You could email me to kick this thing off, podcast@grangersmith.com. Podcast is the email, podcast@grangersmith.com. And I'm going to start this with one question that I've actually seen. And I want to kind of linger on this question a little bit. And I want it to be part of a broader answer that I do. I'll show you what I'm talking about. First question, once again, from podcast@grangersmith.com, says, it's from Jeremiah. It says, hey, Granger, my name is Jeremiah. I met you after Versus Men's Conference in Franklin, Tennessee a few weeks ago. I appreciate the message that you preached in your vulnerability. I've been listening to the podcast since shortly after we met, and it's been a blessing. While listening to the podcast, I thought of a few questions that I would love to get your insight on. Something I've struggled off and on with since graduating from college is balancing my time and keeping a routine that I feel is using my time wisely and not wasting my life. I have a great job in my field of study in which I'm able to engage in ministry, and I'm at the beginning of building some strong friendships since I've moved to Nashville. But there are times when I have unplanned and or downtime when I feel as though I'm just kind of wasting time, unsure of how to spend it. I went to a Christian university, and while in school, I had a like-minded believers around me all the time and plenty to do. I spent a good time in my free time when I could with my friends, exercising, reading, traveling, etc. What is some advice that you would give to someone who's looking to spend their free time in a more meaningful manner? Similarly, how do you balance your time between speaking engagements, family time, traveling for conferences such as Versus, etc.? All right, Jeremiah. Thanks for the question, brother. And I think it's a good one. Really, I could probably answer this question on every podcast from now on and say something have a little bit different answer every single time I do it. So I'm going to try my best to give you a few thoughts, and then I want to go a certain direction with it, which I think will be the theme of this podcast. So, first of all, I appreciate the thought. The vulnerability in this is meaningful to even begin to admit that you got something going on and that you don't want to waste your life. I think most people don't ask that question. So right here off the bat, I like that you're asking this. My life right now is pretty crazy. It's pretty hectic. And that's just kind of the world I live in. I've lived in this world for a long time where I say that my engine is typically running hot. Now, lately, the last several years, half a decade or so, I've been more intentional about how I spend my time and what I'm devoting my time to more meaningful things that matter, things that you look back and you go, okay, those things mattered. If you're on a deathbed looking backwards at your life, I want to do more of the things that I remember as being meaningful as opposed to the things that weren't. And that's a pretty broad way to look at things, but there is a category of meaningful things. And so I appreciate that you're thinking about it. One thing we need to do is be intentional about how we spend our time. So I usually encourage on this podcast time blocking. If you're feeling like there's parts of your day that are wasted, I like to think about this. Time block for 7 days. Write things down. Know exactly what you're doing in each hour of every day. So it's like, hey, from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. I was doing this. From 9 a.m. to 10, I was doing this. From 10:30 to 12, I was doing this. I was driving from here to here. And then look back in 7 days, look back on those different journals that you've kept. And I think we would all be very surprised at how this turns out. I think you'd be surprised at how much time you have left over. And you go, oh, I was doing this. Now, be mindful here as I say these things that wasting time is not taking a nap. I mean, you might legitimately need to take a nap. And some days I think that would be okay. So taking a nap was not wasting time. I'll tell you what I think is wasting time, and that is our smartphones. I'm just as guilty as anyone else. But I think where I want to go with this question really is a broader question of, are our smartphones making us dumb? I think that's a way to say it. And we live in a world where this is the first time in the generations of the past, this is the first time in human history that we've dealt with this specific problem, being distracted by a metal rectangle that we keep in our pocket that's constantly giving us notifications, that gives us complete access to the whole world and anything we might need from it at any given time, people reaching out to us and sending us down rabbit holes constantly all day. Someone will text us with a video clip, for instance, and you got to go to that video, and you go to the video clip, and after that, another video comes up after it that you didn't even mean to watch, and then another one after that, and before you know it, 10 minutes have gone by, and you've been literally unconscious from the world for about 10 minutes. This is wild stuff, and I wonder how many times that we notice this is happening, that our life is literally passing by, and so much of it is glued to a screen looking at meaningless stuff. And we need to know this, and I think a lot of people do, but I'll repeat it if you don't, that social media and all the other different apps that we have on our phone, most of them are free. And if they're a free app, then people aren't just doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They're doing it because if it's a free app, then you are the product. They're selling you. They're not selling the app to you. They are selling you and your attention to other companies. So your attention is for sale. Your attention is monetized. Your attention is algorithmed so that they can get more of it. They know you so well, and they know you're kind so well that they know how to keep your attention on this phone, because if they do, they make more money. The longer you stare at that screen, the more money they make with you, and the more they could sell these advertisers for whatever app you're looking at. So your eyeballs unconsciously looking at the screen is valuable to other companies. And I'll say that they're not necessarily doing this in an evil way. They found a way to make money, and it is by gaining your attention. So they do everything they can to create things like a slot machine that keeps you going back to it over and over and over, pulling that lever. So we need to be aware that this, in my opinion, is beyond just self-discipline. This is beyond, well, I can have a phone in my pocket and I can look at it all the time, but I'm good. I'm not going to go down these rabbit holes. I'm pretty good at being self-disciplined in that way. I would say caution yourself with that, because I'm throwing myself in this conversation that I'm not good at it, and I really don't know anyone that is, that could operate with their phone in their hand or in their pocket all the time, and they're good at not going down rabbit holes, because these companies are making sure that you do go down the rabbit hole. So we need to do other things, like keep the phone out of our pocket. I'm making an effort lately to keep my phone charging in my closet. My charger's in my closet. It's been like that for a long time. I don't ever keep it by my bedside. It's never on my nightstand. I don't have a charger over there. I don't want to look at my phone the last thing I look at before I go to sleep at night. And I don't want to look at it first thing when I wake up. But keeping it away from me helps me not to do it that way. So what I mean is I'm not relying on self-discipline to say, I'm going to keep my phone on this nightstand, but I'm not going to look at it when I wake up. So I'm not relying on that. I'm saying, no, I'm going to help myself not need that kind of self-discipline by just keeping it out of the room altogether, keep it in the closet. So I'm trying to do that more. I'm trying to keep it in that closet as much as I can on that charger, so that it's just, I don't have the temptation. And I'm also not advocating that we should get rid of cell phones completely, or smartphones completely. I think a lot of us have careers, me included, that really revolve around making sure that we are connected. But we need to have boundaries with that kind of connection. And so this specific email, I would say to Jeremiah that I believe phones, if you eliminated half the time you spend on your smartphone, I think you would find a lot of time that you've wasted could then be redeemed for new purposes. Let's look at it from a biblical worldview. Romans 12:2, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. We need to be aware that we are outside the will of God when we've become unconscious, which is why the Bible so many times speaks against being inebriated, against being drunk. Why? Because when you're inebriated, your mind is somewhere else. You can't discern the will of God for your life without clarity in your mind. Philippians 4:8-9, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things. And why? Why does it say this? And the God of peace will be with you. You want peace? Are you lacking peace and you need more peace? Think about whatever is true, honorable, just, pure, lovely, commendable, excellent, worthy of praise. Think, meditate on these things. You can't do that when you're traveling down a rabbit hole on TikTok. I feel like smartphones, correct me if I'm wrong, comment if I'm wrong, smartphones, they are constantly bombarding us with these notifications, the social media, entertainment, drawing our attention away from God. And this kind of distraction, this meaningless distraction makes it difficult to discern God's will, Romans 12:2. We can't renew our mind if our mind is elsewhere. If we're literally unconscious, that's what I think I am when I find myself in this rabbit hole on Instagram for 10 minutes. And I don't like it. Did you know that we are supposed to, 2 Corinthians 10:5, take captive every thought? Right? We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. Instead, smartphones often captivate us, captivate our thoughts, filling our minds with all the trivial content, the worldly arguments, and things that oppose the knowledge of God. You want peace? Grow your knowledge of God. Know more about who He is. Take captive every thought. Not with endless scrolling and superficial content, right? I think that we can call it spiritual inebriation. I don't think it's too far-fetched to call it that. When we overuse our smartphones, we become dull, spiritually weak, spiritually inebriated. I think that's a good way to look at it. We literally become unconscious to the spiritual realities around us. And I think we would say that this would be living recklessly, living foolishly, living a meaningless life the more and more we do it. I don't think I'm overstating things. And I'm trying more and more to think about these things and to try to, like I said, I think it's important, instead of hearing what I say, I think it's important not to say, yeah, man, I need to do less of that. And then you keep your phone in your pocket. All your notifications are still on. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X. It's all right there at your fingertips. You say, I'm not going to look at Twitter today. I'm not going to look at Instagram. And then your buddy texts you. 5 minutes later, he texts you a video of a dog riding a skateboard. And it's an Instagram link. And you go there. And then before you know it, you're scrolling again. It's not your buddy's fault. We haven't set up boundaries. We haven't said, you know what, I'm going to leave my phone in my closet until 3 o'clock because I have some work to do. You know, another thing, when I've got my kids around, I don't want to be looking at my phone. I don't want Maverick to say, Daddy, watch this. And he looks up and I'm looking at my phone because I'm chasing a rabbit. That's interesting, right? We need to destroy the rabbit. We need to learn how to handle the rabbit. Once again, I'm not advocating to go off of all technology, even though I don't think that's a bad idea. It's just not doable for a lot of us. We make a living. Our worlds have integrated themselves into this kind of technology. So I don't think it's possible to completely go away from it. But I think we could dismember the rabbit sometimes. You know those dog races, they have those rabbits that run down the track, those like mechanical rabbits. I heard a story one time where the dogs were chasing this rabbit on the mechanical track, and the rabbit caught fire. The little engine, the little motor in it overheated, and the rabbit caught fire and stopped right there in the track and burned up. The dogs had no idea what to do. They had no idea what direction to go. Some of them just went rogue, started running into the stands. A couple of them just laid down right there in the track. Without the rabbit, they didn't know where to go. Well, I think we could eliminate the rabbit of the smartphone throughout pieces of our day. And Abraham, to your question, I know I can go a lot of different directions with your question, but I think the distractions of our smartphone are probably number one on the list of creating meaningless opportunities for your day. Protect yourself, destroy the rabbit, dismember the rabbit that you're chasing, keep your phone put away. Don't sleep with it. Don't have it on your nightstand. Don't have it around your family. Don't have it at the dinner table. Eliminate these kind of distractions and prevent yourself from needing to have super self-discipline to keep it out of your hands. When you need to work, keep it in your hand, have all the notifications on, and roll with it. But when you're not working, shut that thing off. I think you'll be able to redeem your time, have a lot more left in your day, a lot more in your week, and I think you'll look back, even if you just take a nap and relax, I think you'll have a more meaningful experience of life doing this. Life is full of small regrets and big regrets. Here's a small regret. You're sitting in the dentist chair thinking, I should have probably flossed my teeth a little bit better this past year. A big regret is listening to your doctor and thinking, I should have paid attention to nutrition when I was younger. Better health today and when it matters most is why I take Field of Greens. Field of Greens is unlike any other fruit and vegetable or green product. Field of Greens isn't watered down extracts. Field of Greens is an organic superfood. It's whole fruits and vegetables. Each fruit and vegetable was selected by doctors to support vital functions like heart, liver, kidneys, metabolism, and immune system. And only Field of Greens is backed by a better health promise. At your next checkup, your doctor will notice your improved health or your money back. Hey, don't look back and say, I should have paid more attention to nutrition when I was younger. Field of Greens is a key to better health today and when it matters most. Let's get you started with 15% off and free shipping. Visit fieldofgreens.com and use code Granger. That's promo code Granger at fieldofgreens.com. Hey, if you want to get a hold of me, go to cameo.com/Granger Smith. You will find me there, and from there, I could build you a video message. I get your notes and what you want me to say, like happy birthday, happy anniversary, a word of encouragement, congratulations, good job on the graduation, or why did you not make graduation? Whatever you want me to say, I'll read those notes, and I pull out my phone and I record a video message, and I say whatever you need me to say to whoever you need me to say it to, and I send it right back to you. It's super simple. It's a great gift for the person that you don't know what to buy for. Again, go to Cameo, cameo.com/Granger Smith. Okay, back to answering your questions. Once again, if you want to email me, email podcast@grangersmith.com. Could be about any subject. This one I'm going to talk about right now comes from Carrie. He says, hey, Granger, my name is Carrie. Been following you for a while now, and I've met you multiple times in Louisiana. Your podcast and your music and your book are an inspiration to me. My question to you is, why do I feel like I'm a bad father to my 6-month-old? I feel like I don't do enough. I'm not a good dad. I feel like I'm failing my daughter and my wife, and I don't know why I feel this way. Thank you, Granger. Hope to hear from you soon. Hey, Carrie. Thanks, buddy. I think it's a good question. And these questions are always difficult for me when I can't ask a follow-up. So I don't know a lot about this scenario. So I'm going to have to speak blindly to it, and I think I will. But I need you to know this first. I don't think this question is out of the ordinary. I don't. And I don't think you have to necessarily even be doing anything wrong to still ask the question. Here's why. I remember when London, my daughter, she was my first. I remember when she was about that age, 6 months. And it's kind of no man's land. 6 months because you're out of the excitement of the pregnancy. You're out of the excitement of the birth and the infancy. And all of a sudden you hit this kind of like desert stretch where nothing's really changing. She's kind of starting to be mobile, but not really. She's kind of blabbering, but not really any words yet. And she doesn't even seem to like you, much less know that you even exist. It's like, hey, I helped bring you into the world and you don't even know I exist. It's kind of the feeling that would lead you to be thinking that you're a bad father. And then something changes about 9 or 10 months when they start saying dada. Usually, I think it's probably because it's the easier word to say. They start saying dada before mama. And you're like, hey, I'm actually here. I did something. I'm winning in some way. Like before this, at 6 months, you can't really provide anything. I mean, you could hold a bottle. That's about all you could do. And they don't really want you to even hold them with the bottle. It's not as cool as mama. If she's anything like London was, nearly impossible to put down. And then, years went by before things really got better for me in London. And she doesn't really like me saying this kind of stuff because now she's 12 and just adores me and I adore her and we have such a great relationship. But it took about 7 years of pursuing. And dads of girls, you have to hear this. You got to pursue that little girl. You got to pursue her when she's a toddler. You got to pursue her when she's a preteen. You got to pursue her when she hits those teenage years. You got to pursue her when she's dating boys or when she's breaking up with boys. You got to pursue her when she's meeting that special someone. You got to pursue her when she's getting older and she's having babies of her own. You don't ever stop pursuing her. You don't ever stop. And I think probably when I think about it, that's probably one of the biggest flaws of fathers of girls is they stop pursuing or they don't pursue because they don't get the reaction that they're looking for. Because pursuing a little girl as a father, the success of that pursuing is not contingent on how they respond to you, because you could pursue and you don't get anything out of it. They act annoyed or they act not interested. But the success of the pursuing is in the action itself, not the result that you're getting from them. We have to remember that. So we pursue again and again and again, knowing that it's the effort of the action that merits the result of success, not how they respond to you. I remember London told me something horrifying she was probably 4, and she said, Daddy, I wish you'd just go back to the airport, because I was traveling a lot at the time as a musician. And, if any human tells you something so heartbreaking, like go back to the airport, the natural response to that would be to stop caring, stop pursuing for sure. But it's not what fathers of little girls do. We just keep pouring in, we keep chasing them. And I believe, I still have a long race to run with London, but I believe our relationship is continuing to grow and deepen. And now that we're entering with her a very interesting phase of preteen and teenage years coming up, so many unknowns and so many scary things, honestly, that I think pursuing her and having that investment of chasing her, just being there for so many years, I hope, I pray that it will pay off. I think another way to look at this too, and I think it's important to carry to also say that let's relate it to the first question about cell phones and just say, make sure that your smartphone is put away when you are being present with your little girl, because that's ultimately what you want right now is just to be present with her. And even when she doesn't want you and she rejects you and she acts like she just despises you, you just want to be present with her. And in order to do that, you got to put the phone down. So that's, once again, I say, let's make sure it's in the closet. And this feeling about being a bad father, if you're doing these things, I believe that's going to go away. And I think you're going to be all right. Next question comes from Luke. It says, hey, Granger, my name is Luke from Minnesota. Recently, I had to make a very hard decision. I had to choose between my wife and my son from a previous marriage. He got attacked by our family dog, which was a 120-pound Great Pyrenees. My son got bit in the face, and then, in the moment, he decided to shoot the dog. I don't think this was his decision to make, but it happened. My wife said we needed to send my son into a psych ward and keep him away from our family. She has since moved out and filed for divorce. I cannot give up on my child. I have him in therapy, and I'm talking to his youth pastor. He's talking to his youth pastor. I've asked my wife if she'd be willing to go to counseling. She will not and refuses to talk to me. She calls my son a murderer. I do not want to give up on our marriage, but she seems to want to throw it all away so easily. She's also trying to make my other son stay away from me. Any advice you would have would be great. Thanks, Luke. Oh man, Luke, this is tough. Once again, so hard to not hear the full story. I wonder what the full story is. You know what? There has to be more to this. I don't think you or your son are completely innocent in this. There's got to be more to than, I don't think he was an angel and then all of a sudden shot the dog and now he's the devil. I think there's probably a history here with your new wife and your son. I think there's probably a history. And I don't know how old he was or is. If he has a gun, that's something. I mean, he's at least a teenager. Getting attacked by a 120-pound dog is no light thing. It's not an easy topic. I mean, a few weeks ago, I had to shoot a wild dog that was on our property. Long story. I tried to shoot this dog off. It was trying to bite Amber. It ended up in the garage. I ran it off. It stayed the night, was at our chicken coop, prowling our chicken coop. The next morning, I went out there, tried to get rid of it again with a stick. It tried to attack me, lunge at me, so I went and took care of business. So I'm not saying that your son is completely off on this, but I believe a family dog, there's a different nuance. And you said this was not his decision to make, but that's what happened. So you're not necessarily defending him in this. But what's weird is the whole divorce thing, because there's a strange nuance that when you get married, you've committed your life to your wife, which is the problem. It's problematic with the second marriage, right? That's nothing you can do about it now, but that's just where we are. And when you commit yourself and you say, hey, through sickness and health, through richer or poor, better or worse, I'm here for you. And that would include, regardless of what happens with my son, I'm here for you. You've made this decision, this covenant with this woman. And so if indeed you are trying to reconcile, because at all costs you want to reconcile the marriage, you don't want to get divorced here. And even if your son has to go to rehab or therapy or whatever, and you could still reconcile the marriage, then you want to do that. You don't want to say, okay, I'm choosing my son over her. Because what might be better for your son is that you stay in this marriage. I think that might be the thing you want to model to him anyway. And so I think your son would understand, son, I've made a commitment to my wife. I need to stand by her. I need to reconcile this marriage. And to do that is helping you also. So I don't think this is necessarily a choice. Got to have the son or got to have the wife. I think having the wife helps with the son. You see what I mean? And so if she's indeed saying, I'm out of here, and you've tried everything you can to reconcile, then what do you do at that point? I just think there's a lot more in the story that I don't know about. I think that's the deal. I don't think she just calls your son a murderer because he shot a dog, which is the wrong definition of murder. But I think there must be more, especially if she's trying to keep the other son away. So buddy, keep hanging in here. Man, I sure would love you to see you involving a local pastor, that's your pastor, that you're in a committed relationship with a church body that's able to pour into you, and you have men around you, wise counsel around you. I sure would like to see that too through the situation. This is something you just shouldn't and can't do alone. You need to have wise men around you, which is that's how a church is supposed to function, is to come and rally around you and love on you and love on your wife and help your son and suggest things and be tough sometimes, some tough love. But I sure would love to see that. So whatever this youth pastor thing is, you said you got him talking to his youth pastor. I wish it was also, and you're talking to your pastor. I wish that was part of this too. Hey, keep engaged here with this podcast too. Let's move on. Seth has got the next question. Hey, Granger, longtime fan of your music and now a huge fan of your sermons and podcast. Thanks for taking the time to read this. I'm in my 30s. I've been a Christian for a long time. I grew up in a Christian household where we went to church every Sunday. However, as I got older, I would say early 20s, I found my parents' church to be off base biblically by quite a bit, and found the congregation following their pastor rather than Christ. I left the church in agreement with my wife, who felt the same way, and we went to a different church that was preaching straight from the Bible. Again, this was in my early 20s when all this went down, and ever since then, my parents have what feels like held resentment against my wife and I for leaving the church and thinking that we were just doing our own thing. I try to have a deep spiritual conversation with my parents, but they just end up straying from the Bible and talking about either what their pastor says or getting into some kind of weird political conversation, which has nothing to do with what we're talking about. What would your suggestion be to have a deep spiritual conversation with my parents rather than having just shallow conversations when they start sidetracking it with politics? To bring it back to the meat of the conversation, keep up the great music and helping all of us dive further into our relationship with Christ. Thanks, Granger. Seth. Seth, thanks for the email, brother. This is a tough situation, although I see it many times on this podcast. I see similar questions to this. And I think most of the time when I see something like this, what I see lacking is our call to honor our parents with respect. And sometimes I think we need to be reminded that respecting our parents doesn't mean agreeing with them. In fact, you could use that for anything in life, any other relationship we have. Respect another human being, another image bearer of God, doesn't mean that you have to agree with what they say. You could disagree respectfully. That's why people say, I respectfully disagree. But do you really act like that? With honor, with respect that they deserve just because they're your parents and they're your elders. So I can't help but wonder if there's a little bit of that, Seth, that's lacking in these conversations. Because I see this a lot on these podcasts, and I see that the parents get frustrated when a kid goes to a different church, which there's nothing wrong with that. You got married, you went to a different church, you want to start your new family at a new church. That's great. Me looking from the outside, I go, okay, I get it. But from the inside, when they're in, they're like, hey, our kid is not going here anymore. He thinks he's too big for his britches. So what are they screaming for in that situation? Respect. They're wanting respect. They want to be honored. They want to be respected. And you could do that and go to a different church at the same time. You don't have to choose. So what you crave, Seth, you asked is, how do I have a deep spiritual conversation with my parents rather than just shallow conversations? I think it starts with, dinner, time together, undistracted, no smartphones in the pocket at the time. And I think you say, how's things going at the church, Mom and Dad? And they say, it's going amazing. Pastor so-and-so is talking about this. And in your mind, you're like, well, that sounds like a terrible thing to talk about on a Sunday morning, but you don't say that. You say, I'm glad that is encouraging for you. Where in the Bible have you been most encouraged lately? And they give you an answer and you say, can I share something that's really encouraged me lately? And you go to the Bible. Because when you go to the Bible, what you're doing is you're appealing to you're appealing to the rock, as opposed to saying, here's my opinion, and your pastor's wrong, Mom. Here's my opinion on it. And your politics are wrong, Mom. Here's my opinion on it. Instead, you go to the Bible and go, here's what the Bible says. And you don't say it in a judgmental way. You say, I want to show you what's really encouraged me lately in the Bible, knowing that that Bible and that Word of God is God-breathed. And when you speak it, to disagree with that would be disagreeing with Jesus. And I don't think in a conversation, no one wants to say, I disagree with Jesus here. They desperately want to say, I disagree with you, Seth. And so don't give them that opportunity. Don't give them that option of saying, here's my opinion, Mom, this pastor's wrong. Instead, walk lovingly, gently through Scripture with them and say, this has been encouraging so much lately. At church on Sunday, our pastor was talking about, could I show you this, Mom? This is so life-giving to me. This is so nourishing for me. I just want to show you. And she can't at that point say, I don't agree with that, because she's saying, I don't agree with Scripture, and your mom won't say that. So I think in order to get there, that's what you want. Your desire is to get into a deep spiritual conversation with your parents, and I don't think you can get there because I think there's a respect problem that's putting up a wall at the very beginning of this conversation. And to break down that wall, to honor them, to respect them, you're going to have to probably have a few times with your parents where you don't give your opinion at all. You don't smirk. You don't roll your eyes. You don't say, I disagree with that. That's why I don't go to that church anymore, Mom. Instead, you just go, I'm glad that's encouraging for you, Mom, Dad. And then you say, and Mom, I really love these green beans. Have you made these a different way in the past? Give her compliments. Enjoy the food. Enjoy the conversation. You're not going to have your parents forever. Listen more than you talk. Sometimes they say, listen 70%. You might want to listen 80% and talk 20. But you got to build up this love with them so that they could actually listen to you, build them up, encourage them. Be glad that you have parents that even go into church, right? You say they love the pastor rather than Christ. Well, if the pastor is bringing them in a routine to church every morning, then let them sit with that for a little bit. It's good. That's a good habit that they're in. And then through Scripture, you could show them the truth without showing them your opinion. But you got to do it in a loving, respectful way, an honoring way. And I think you can do it, Seth. And I think instead of blame, I think this is something that you could take in yourself, you and your wife. You guys both have to be on the same page with this. And I think you can go in and show some serious maturity that maybe you didn't have in your early 20s, and now you do have in your 30s. I think you can model something really special. I love you guys. That's all I have for now. If you want to ask me a question, just email podcast@grangersmith.com, and we'll see you guys next Monday. Yee. Thanks for joining me on the Granger Smith podcast. I appreciate all of you guys. You could help me out by rating this podcast on iTunes. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to this channel, hit that little like button and the notifications bell so that you never miss any time I upload a video. If you have a question for me that you would like me to answer, email grangersmithpodcast@gmail.com. Yee.